One of the biggest reasons sellers of properties sometimes struggle to sell is because they have unrealistic expectations. Now, I'm not speaking here about a house that someone else is going to live in, right? I'm not speaking about residential property in that manner. I'm speaking about investment property, commercial property that generates an income. There's a way, there's a methodology for how you calculate what that property should be sold for. And sometimes I'll put in an offer on a property and the seller will then decline, and they'll say, okay, your offer is too low. And I'll say, okay, cool. And I'll be like, okay, how are you getting to your number? And more often than not, it's like they can't tell me. And that's when you can see that the seller basically just came up with this number in their mind that it'll be nice to get this number, right? It'll make me all warm and fuzzy. But when you ask them how they're getting to that number, they actually can't tell you, right? That's something I'm faced with a deal I'm negotiating right now. At the beginning of the year, I signed for a deal, a very large transaction, which ultimately that deal closed literally within the last 3 weeks. It was a deal where a commercial property where I actually flipped the deal. But when I put in the offer, it was based on a specific scientific criteria for coming up with a number. And it was such a pleasure negotiating with that seller because that seller understood the numbers. And when I showed them, this is how I'm calculating the number, they came back and, we negotiated. So they wanted A and I was suggesting B. And we actually then agreed on C, which ended up being a reasonable price. They were happy, I was happy, and I could still make a deal work with an investor that I was bringing into the deal. And that was a wonderful transaction to do. But most of the time I'm faced with transactions where I'm dealing with sellers that are not as sophisticated. So when you ask them, how are you coming up with your selling price? Like, what makes you think that the property is worth that amount? And they actually can't tell you. It's just like, no, well, I think it's worth this. But there's no scientific methodology that they've applied to come up with the number. And that's one of the biggest reasons they struggle to sell. Like the property I'm negotiating on now, that property has been sitting on the market for over 3 years. And it'll probably sit there for another 3 years unless they are able to look at the numbers and say, well, based on the numbers, this is actually where the selling price should be. So that's how it should be done. If you negotiate with a seller that understands the numbers, I think the negotiation is a lot easier.